So welcome to the Rise Up for Abortion Rights Emergency webinar. What is at stake with the potential banning of Mifepristone? Why women need legal abortion on demand and without apology. I'm Sam Goldman, an organizer with Rise Up for Abortion Rights and the host of the Refuse Fascism Podcast. And I am so glad to be with you at this emergency moment. You are in the right place. Today, we're coming together because a Trump-appointed fascist federal judge in Texas is poised to rule any day whether to revoke the FDA's approval of the abortion medication, Mifepristone. If he does this common and safe and incredibly effective abortion medication could be banned nationwide, even in states where abortion is legally protected. Meanwhile, anti-abortion legislation continues to sweep the nation, advancing and escalating in its cruelty. Just this past week, Utah banned abortion clinics, which is essentially a total abortion ban for the state. And Wyoming has become the first state to specifically ban medication abortion, a harbinger of what's to come. In today's program, you will hear from co-initiators of Rise Up for Abortion Rights, Merle Hoffman and Sunsara Taylor. They're going to both give short presentations, and then they'll be in discussion on what we face and what must be done. You'll then hear from Chantelle and Patricia on ways that you can take action, and then we'll be getting into your questions. So again, welcome. We are so glad you're here. It's not too late to invite people, so continue to spread the word. And I'm gonna kick it off by welcoming Merle Hoffman. Merle is founder and CEO of Choices Women's Medical Center. She's the author of Intimate Wars, The Life and Times of the Woman Who Brought Abortion from the Back Alley to the Boardroom. And she is a co-initiator of Rise Up for Abortion Rights. Welcome, Merle.
Hi. And Sam, I was just saying that it's very good to be here today because we have to be. There's no option. Yes, my name is Merle Hoffman, and I identify as a second-class citizen of these United States because I believe as long as one woman is not free to access legal, safe abortion in these United States, all women are not free. As long as one woman is under the control of local and state politicians, one woman in one state, none of us are free. So I ask you, how dare they attempt to relegate women's lives, women's dreams, women's health, women's freedom to second-class citizens? How dare they play theocratic and political games with our health, our families, and our lives? And I also want you to think about, should we think about or consider relegating the right to free speech, the right to vote, the right to worship to the states? These are ostensibly fundamental, transcendent rights that, Trump, if I may use that word, Trump states' rights. So why not the access to legal, safe abortion? Because legal, safe abortion and the access to it is the core of women's health, women's freedom, and women's liberty. Women are active moral agents, and we must have the right to determine how and when we reproduce. The right to access abortion and having an abortion is sometimes an act of love and sacrifice, but it's always an act of necessity. So we at Rise Up have been demanding, and we continue to demand, and we are urging all of us to demand legal, safe abortion nationwide. And this is in the name of our daughters our mothers and our grandmothers who so often had to lay down their bodies and give their lives many times on dirty kitchen tables for the right to choose. I am also demanding that you look around you to see what's going on here. I did not and do not celebrate Women's History Month this year, nor did I celebrate International Women's Day. And I'm not going to say we should all try and consume some product that says we perform feminism, or because we went to one march, we are feminists. I want us to look to Iran, look towards Iran, where Amani's torture and death in the hands of the state police because she showed just a little bit of hair under her chador has caused an incredible rising and an incredible rising of women in Iran, okay? And they throw their headscarves into the fire, knowing that they're risking their lives every time they do it. And now, have you read the reports of hundreds of young girls, young students who are being poisoned all across Iran, and they're ending up in hospitals, and some are close to death. And the question is why, and who was doing this? And I know, and I think, I don't care who's doing it. I know who's doing it. Misogyny is doing it. And this is a very direct understanding and example of how misogyny anywhere and everywhere can kill. And then I want you to look towards Afghanistan, where our worst fears have been realized. Our worst fears. It is so obvious that the Taliban's treatment of women and girls is gender genocide, right? Gender genocide and the crime against humanity. And then just look to Poland, where I did work. They just look to Poland. And then you'll see that they just gave a criminal sentence to a woman who just assisted a friend on the phone in a conversation to talk about where she could potentially get an abortion. Now, I think we should come home. And as Sam said, let's come home and let's look to Wyoming, the first state on Friday who explicitly banned the use of pills for first trimester abortion, adding fuel to the fire of the conservatives and theocrats, okay, who want to ban abortion nationwide. Now, I read that the governor prayed on this. He said, and he was quoted that he prayed on this, prayed to his God, which I'm assuming is the Christian God. And he heard that voice, and that voice said to him, save the babies. Forget about the women, but save the babies. This is a big problem. This is a very big problem. Now, Wyoming's law comes as we wait for the ruling in Texas, which could overturn the use of Mifepristone, which is the first drug in the regime for the medical abortions, and would cause a major issue and has weaponized medicine all across the country. And don't think that there are safe spaces. Don't even begin to consider that, oh, well, we live in New York or California. We're safe. There are no safe spaces now. There is nothing safe for women and girls. So at home, this is where everybody would say, it could never happen. It couldn't happen here. They would never do it. They would never turn over Roe v. Wade. Couldn't happen. Well, we said it would happen, and it did happen. It could and did happen. It would be very wise for all of us to believe what our enemies say when they say it. Very wise. We cannot underestimate, we cannot diminish their persistence, their commitment, and their absolute ruthlessness to try and overturn legal abortion nationwide. Since the overturning of Roe, I think more than a dozen states have banned abortion, and most have banned them at 6 weeks, or some without any exclusions for rape or incest. Do not think again that you can ever be safe from this. So are we going to accept this? Are we going to capitulate? Are we going to conform? Or are we going to resist? Are we going to resist? I think it's time for courage, commitment, audacity, daring, perseverance, and real struggle. Real struggle. I'm in it for as long as it takes. And I challenge all of you to make that commitment to be in it for as long as it takes. The power of the state, for me, stops at my skin. And that's the line in the sand that I draw. So women's rights remain in a state of emergency. So I ask you, if not now, when? And if not, you. So that's my challenge today.
I want to thank you so much, Merle, for those really, really powerful words. I'm now happy to welcome on Sunsara Taylor. She is a co-host of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show on YouTube and a co-initiator of Rise Up for abortion rights. Welcome, Sunsara.
Hi, it's so great to be with everybody. And I want to thank Merle for your remarks and Sam for hosting and everybody for tuning in. We've got a really important thing we are talking about. Last year, when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned nearly 50 years of precedent, constitutional protection for women's right to abortion, millions and millions were shocked by this. A right that millions of women had built their lives around, had determined the shape of their lives for generations, was gone overnight. And many thought this came out of nowhere. It seemed to come out of nowhere, but it didn't. And this is what I want to speak about today. What has given rise to this assault? Because again, we are now facing a federal judge, a Trump-appointed judge, threatening to take away medication abortion across this country. And most don't know about this, but when they hear about it, they are shocked. They can't believe this is happening. And yet this too did not come out of nowhere. These assaults have been building and they are not stopping. Also, when you hear the Democratic Party leaders and when you hear most of the so-called reproductive rights movement in this country talk about the assault on abortion, they usually speak about it in terms of bodily autonomy, an assault on bodily autonomy, or an assault on healthcare. And I want to speak about why this is neither fundamentally about bodily autonomy or healthcare. It is an assault on women's lives and women's fundamental rights. So in the deepest sense, the current assault on abortion rights grows out of thousands of years of patriarchal oppression and degradation of women, of treating women as property of men and breeders of children. This is not human nature, but it has been a key feature of every society for thousands of years all over the world that has been divided into masters and slaves, into exploiters and exploited, into oppressors and oppressed. And this is no less true in today's so-called modern capitalist imperialist society. The patriarchal family is still the key economic and social unit of society. So this is thousands of years and it's still with us. But in a more immediate sense, the fight over abortion in this country at this time grows out of the profound changes that have been brought about in this patriarchal family and in the social position and role of women in this society in recent decades. Now, there have been profound changes in the role of women all over the world in recent decades, but I want to focus on what's gone on in this country, especially in the last period since Roe v. Wade. We should note that a lot of the advances women have made in the change in their social position has come from the ferocious struggle of women for their liberation. And the 1973 Supreme Court decision, which legalized abortion nationwide, grew to a very large degree out of this mass struggle and other struggles that were being waged at the time. It was not granted from on high. But this struggle of women also interacted with major changes in the US and global economy overall. and the way that this undermined many traditional forms of patriarchy and pulled women out of the homes and into the workforce. Within the US, there has been a sharp decline in recent decades in manufacturing jobs, and a sharp decline in the ability of a family to survive on a single income, one male breadwinner in the patriarchal family. So this has both required and enabled women to enter the job force, a job force that is more defined by services than ever before: medical, information, finance, technical, government, and so on. Today, women outpace men as college graduates. Women are advancing in the professions, even as they still face discrimination and sexual harassment. And even among the most economically desperate populations in this country, women often have an easier time finding employment in service and retail than men find overall. And so none of this has ended patriarchy. None of this has ended the need for the patriarchal family in this society, but it has profoundly changed the social position of women and what many women feel they want to put up with and have as expectations for their lives. And you have millions and millions of people who see this as a positive advance and want to take this further. At the same time, because this system still requires the patriarchal family and the patriarchal oppression of women, and because of thousands of years of the way that this has shaped and molded the culture and men, this has also given rise to an incredible, vicious backlash against women. And this is something that is discussed very deeply by the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian in an interview that I was able to conduct with him together with Andy Z on the Revolution Nothing Less show. And he goes into it, the interplay between these social role of women and these economic changes much more deeply. And I would point people to that on the Revolution Nothing Less show at youtube.com/therevcoms. But one of the most concentrated forms of the backlash against women and a real revenge against the way that women have broken out of their traditional place and their traditional role subordinate to men has been a growing Christian fascist assault on abortion rights, which has never been about babies, but has always been about forcing women backwards into a more openly subordinate position to their men, to their husbands, and to men overall, and using the state to do so. Because when women are forced to have children against their will, they are not able to enter the public realm in the ways that we have seen. And these fascists hate that. That is what they are out to reverse. And that is why they are deadly serious. And that is why we say forced motherhood is female enslavement. And the fight over abortion is about women's social position in society, whether women are full human beings or whether they will be treated as incubators and property of men. And as Bob Avakian also further examines in this interview and in his work overall, at this point in this time in this country, this assault on abortion and on women overall, this Christian fascist juggernaut has become a spear point and a battering ram of a larger fascist program, which has an assault on LGBTQ rights, white supremacy, anti-immigrant xenophobia, all of this woven into it, as well as a vicious America First aggressive orientation towards the rest of the world, even more so. And this is a very dangerous time. And my point in going into the roots of this and the depth of what is changing in our society and world is to drive home that this will not stay as it is, and it is not going back to quote unquote normal, as unsatisfactory as that was, as outrageously oppressive as this society has always been for many people and for the world. We are moving in a radically reactionary direction. They have captured, these Christian fascists, the highest court in the land. As we'll discuss with this Mifepristone case, they have packed their theocratic judges on the federal judiciary from the lowest levels all the way up to the top. And they are moving aggressively to remake American society in a Handmaid's Tale fashion, a Dark Ages theocratic way, and it will not stop unless it is defeated. Now, in the most fundamental sense, I come at this as a fighter for an actual revolution, to get beyond this system as a whole and to bring about a radically different kind of system in society where we can really go to work at uprooting millennia of patriarchal oppression and all oppression based on gender and sexual orientation and all oppression and exploitation generally here and around the world. But I come, I should say, at the fight for abortion rights and the movement Rise Up for Abortion Rights with the recognition that we will not make a liberating revolution if we lay down and accept this assault on women, and that many people from many different perspectives also share the desire to see women treated as full human beings, not as incubators and property of the state, and that we have to unite all who can be united, to step out of politics as usual, to stop relying on elections alone, to stop accommodating and conciliating with an assault that will not stop until women are enslaved and brutally in ways that we haven't seen in generations. That it is time for us to find our courage, to forge our unity, to debate our differences with principle and a broad mind, and to stand together because we refuse to accept a world where women are subordinated, where women are enslaved, where their rights are denied, where they are shamed and hounded and forced into the misery that forced motherhood brings, especially in a world where they are still surrounded by all the other forms that we know of patriarchal degradation and discrimination that they face. So it is with that spirit and eagerness to get into the discussion that we're going to share here today that I want to conclude by saying, legal, as Merle did, legal abortion on demand and without apology, nationwide and everywhere. Forced motherhood is female enslavement. Rise up for abortion rights. Thank you.
I want to thank you, Sunsara, for those remarks. And I want to thank everybody who's been sending questions in. I think that a lot of the questions that Merle and Sunsara are going to be speaking to are questions that you're sending in as well. So keep sending them in. Go to the Q&A box and send them our way. Again, thank you for the thoughtful questions that have already been sent in. I wanted to start, Merle, with a question mainly to you, based on your experience, but Sunsara, of course, you're welcome to add. What is Mifepristone? What is Mifepristone, and how do we know it's safe? There's a lot, if people do read the very few reports that have been in the media about it, they hear that they're moving to revoke, they're asking the FDA to revoke approval and talking about it being accelerated. Is it safe? So what is Mifepristone? How do we know it's safe? And what would it mean practically for providers and women if this drug is denied across the country?
Mifepristone is the first part of a two-drug regime that was started to be distributed in about 2000 by Danco. At the time that it was under review and multiple scientific studies, Danco had asked the Board of National Abortion Federation, of which I was part of, to come, and they were giving this presentation so NAF would know and would be available for understanding how this is going to be rolled out. Because prior to the use of Mifepristone, there were the use of Mifepristone. You can get them mixed up. Mifepristone is the second part of the two-drug regime to end the pregnancy by medication. Okay, medical abortion. So the Mifepristone is sort of the drug that assists, helps get the body ready to expel the fetus. So it's taken as the first drug. And this drug has been studied in the highest level of the FDA's approval, in the highest level of scientific regulated 0.01, 0.05 levels. They've done massive studies on this because, of course, they were aware that this drug is entering into a political environment as it was. And they wanted to have it, and not only a political environment, it has to do with women and pregnancy. So they did everything necessary to gain this FDA approval. And what will happen if, in fact, Mifepristone is not allowed to be used, and that means that the courts would, again, I hate this word, but I'll use override, let's say, override scientific knowledge and override all of the very, very vigorous studies and say, no, somebody's preyed on it, or a couple of more people have had epiphanies, and it's going to be overturned. So what will this mean? Well, first of all, when Danco came and they wanted to introduce this Mifepristone, they truly believed that this would be the answer to all of the debates about abortion. Because you see, once you introduce Mifepristone and women started to use it and saw how, it was basically easy, you just take a pill and then you expel the fetus at home, then doctors could give this out in their offices. So clinics would not be targets for terrorists or for the antis. Well, you see, it didn't turn out that way because the antis found out, of course, what the tactic was, and they managed to tell everybody who was dispensing it. So now we are where we are. So what will happen for the patients? Understand that surgical abortions and medical abortions are two different types of procedures for first trimester abortions, which is only up to 12 weeks. Now, why would somebody choose a surgical abortion as opposed to a medical abortion? Think of, well, it's so much easier just taking 2 pills, or if it's necessary, 1 pill. But then you have to think about, well, with a surgical abortion, you only go to the clinic once, takes 5 minutes or 7 of the procedure itself. You go home, you come for a 2-week checkup, and that's it, okay? With the medical abortion, you have to be sure that you're in a safe place, okay? There are many women who are in violent relationships who can't really go into a room and close the door and say, don't bother me, I'm passing, a fetus now. How about the women in prison? How about the women who are in areas of this country who can't even access this? So there's a difference, and there's a psychological and personality part that goes into whether you choose a surgical or medical abortion. Okay, now let's jump into, let's say that they ban Mifepristone. That's the first drug. And at this point, we'll only have Mifepristone. Number one, it's not as effective as the 2 drugs, which means the 2 drugs are about 90 to 95% effective. Mifepristone is about 80 to 85, could be 90. You really do need a sonogram because there's more instances of ectopic pregnancies, more instances. You need to be close to an area where you can access a surgical abortion in case you need one, because there's a higher rate of failure. There's a lot more vomiting, there's a lot more nausea, there's a lot more cramping, and there's a lot more pain. So the patients who will only take the pill, the 1 pill, are going to be subject to a lot more side effects, to not having the ability to have a provider who will have the backup necessary, either the hospital or the sonography or the radiology or any of what would be necessary, or the surgeon to do this. So all of these women who are just getting the pills sent over from telemedicine or different areas are going to be in deep trouble. I mean, we at Choices have just started to and really have been ready to have new protocols for this, because even, for instance, in New York, if somebody could take them, and yes, if they're having a problem, they can call Choices, they can come in, they can have surgery. This is not the case in the state. So this is a total weaponization of medicine. This is actually using physicians and medicine as an arm of the state to push through their policy of how they want women to reproduce. So not how, but they just want us to reproduce. So this is what we're looking at. It's extremely dangerous. The very idea, now understand that I've been working in this for like 51 years. April next month, it'll be 52, my whole life. And, the idea of women's agency, the best standards for women's health, that's down the drain, absolutely down the drain. So it's egregious. I would even call it evil. I would use the word evil.
Thank you for that breakdown, Merle. I wanted to see if Sunsara, you could come into the conversation so that we could talk about a little bit more about what are the stakes of this case and how this fits into the larger Christian fascist assault on women's fundamental right to abortion.
I appreciate what Merle just broke down, because abortion is one of those things that's, I mean, a lot of medical procedures people don't know that much about until they have to get
Have to have it.
But even more so with abortion, that's so shamed and stigmatized, because women, it's so common. 1 in 3, 1 in 4 women go through it, but very few talk about it. And so it's really important for that to be demystified, made plain for everybody, including that, just the difference with medication abortion. The thing I would add to what, or underscore in what Merle said is, I remember we were talking about this the other day, getting ready for this webinar, is I remember back in the 90s, when I first started standing up for abortion rights, defending abortion clinics while doctors were being killed and the clinics were being blockaded. And I went to a major conference at that time, I think they were just starting to use the framework of reproductive rights and reproductive freedom. I went to a major conference of it, and everybody was saying, well, this pill is coming. And just like Merle said, this will do an end run around the assault on abortion rights, because they won't be able to control it. They won't be, and we've heard this same thing. First of all, it wasn't true. The Christian fascist movement organized, they shut down hundreds of clinics. They drove a lot of doctors out of providing abortions. Yes, others stepped in, but they did actual damage. They stigmatized and isolated abortion from other medical health care. And they passed law after law, restriction after restriction, unnecessary. They packed the federal courts. And then, as we saw last year, they finally got where they had been aiming to, and they were able to overturn abortion rights. And the whole time through, and one of the reasons we started Rise Up for Abortion Rights is we looked out as this decision was looming, and there was a complete collapse of the so-called reproductive rights movement. And there was no call to rally against this, to mobilize opposition in the streets, to say we must not let this go down. I mean, there was a leak exposing what they were going to rule on a few months before they ruled. But even before that, if you listen to the hearings, which I understand the broad public didn't, but the reproductive rights movement did, if you listen to the Supreme Court hearing, it was clear they were bent towards overturning Roe v. Wade, or at least seriously undercutting it. We listened to those hearings, that was obvious. And we looked out and nobody was saying, let's mobilize opposition to prevent this from going down. Instead, there were a lot of groups preparing for after Roe fell. Now, a lot of that preparation matters, but not in absence of or a substitution for fighting for your rights while you still have them. And we then formed Rise Up for Abortion Rights to step into that breach, to call forward mass struggle. And we did, and it really matters that there was a fighting opposition. And if more people had joined us, we might have stopped the Supreme Court from taking away abortion rights. But what I want to come to is that what was this so-called reproductive rights movement doing instead? During the hearing, when the Supreme Court, in December of 2021, when the Supreme Court was actually weighing the arguments over whether or not to overturn Roe, there was so-called reproductive rights leaders outside the courthouse holding up the abortion pills and chanting, abortion pills forever. You may have the courts, but we have abortion pills. And we have footage of this. We ran this on the Revolution Nothing Less show. It was put on Democracy Now! I'm not making this up. They were waving their pills around saying, we don't care if you overturn this constitutional right, we will always have abortion pills because we can self-medicate, we can spread them. This was, from in the 90s all the way till now, people kept proclaiming that this was a way to do an end run around a fascist movement that is hell-bent on forcing women backwards. It is not. First of all, it mattered that they took away the right from the national level because it shut down abortion in 14 states already. It allowed a floodgate of further restrictions, and we're just at the beginning end of this. But as we are seeing, it took them barely any time at all to conjure up electoral schemes to take away, I mean, not electoral, legal schemes to take away Mifepristone and medication abortion. And there's a lot of different legal avenues they're going at this with. And the stakes are going up in terms of denying women the care they need, including miscarriage management, but just terminating an unwanted pregnancy, but also the stakes of charging women with crimes, with felonies, of charging those who help them with felonies. Right now, there's a lawsuit in Texas where 3 women are being sued and accused of murder in a lawsuit for allegedly helping a woman there access medication abortion to self-induce. And it's an ex-husband who is doing this. I mean, this is giving patriarchal men the weapon of the state to go after their property, their wives, their women as they see them, and to anybody who would help them. And this is, again, we are not even a year past Roe being overturned. We are only on the beginning end of what's coming behind this, if it's not fought and defeated. So I guess I see this as a threat to medication abortion and abortion access generally. I see it as a harbinger or further proof of where this is headed. And the final thing is, it's a real escalation in the weaponizing and the utilization of what is now a theocratic packed federal judiciary, which will continue to encroach on the rights of women, the rights of LGBTQ people, the rights of many others, in violation of the rule of law and in violation of basic separations of powers, because a federal judge has every right to rule on unconstitutional national policy, but has no right to overrule a medical scientific evaluation of the FDA. But that's what's being entertained here.
Dan, I have a couple of responses to that.
Please.
Yeah. I want to talk about embeddedness of this right. And I spoke about in my opening comments, the right to vote, the right to worship, the right of free speech. These are not embedded in our bodies, in our biological cells. The right to abortion is embedded in us, in our ability to reproduce in our wombs, which is why I have been calling, and it was thought about, and even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in the early days of Roe, said she was happy about the result, but not about the ruling or how we got there. I'm calling for it to be argued and institutionalized under the 13th Amendment, the amendment that will against slavery. Because if you, in fact, are forced to reproduce, you become a slave of the state. As Sarah said, or you said, the handmaiden, whatever. Another point, Sarah, that you made is this kind of, it's a magical kind of thinking that I think the major pro-choice organizations have, which is that, the democracy, so-called democracy, the elections will save us, or the pill will save us. You see, everybody will save us, so we don't have to take responsibility for ourselves. And this is a critical point. It's so easy to say, well, the state or the elections or the science or the pills, everything that daddy thought up, that's going to say, well, I'm saying today, and I think it's very important, nobody says that you have to save yourself. We have to take responsibility for our rights. We have to take responsibility to act. It's not enough, and I use the word performative politics. It is not, or it has ever been, enough just to go to one march. That doesn't do it. This requires struggle. This requires sacrifice. This requires doing it every damn day, every Saturday and maybe 3 other days a week. Those antis are in front of choices, screaming, carrying on, saying what they've said for the last decades. Nothing stops them. Nothing should stop us. But we have to get up and finally fully say, I am responsible for these rights. I must be vigilant. I must sacrifice. Without that, we'll never be able to overcome this. You won't. You know, it'll just be a few of us holding green signs and screaming and yelling. And meanwhile, they're rising up in other parts of the world. And we have to ask ourselves why we don't have that courage. And we have to practice. I was talking about we have to practice that courage. Make that first step. So that's right.
You know, I really appreciate what both of you have been bringing into the conversation. It's been incredibly rich, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about something that Sunsara touched on, but I think we could go deeper into, which was you both initiated Rise Up for Abortion Rights at a time when the Democrats and the repro rights movement was silent, when Roe was directly on the chopping block. And then some of those very groups viciously attacked Rise Up for Abortion Rights, but now all the things that they promised would make the overturning of Roe not that bad, not that big of a deal, are coming to pass. You know, most pointedly right now with a potential banning of Mifepristone, which, let's get real, medication abortion is the most common method of abortion in this country.
Right.
You know, we're talking about it impacting millions. So what do you have to say about this?
What do I have to say? The Democrats had the ability to codify Roe in different ways. Obama had the ability to do that. He signed Hyde, if everybody remembers the Hyde Amendment in 1977, which politicized me, cut off Medicaid funds for poor women. You know, I mean, that is in the budget bills every single year. And that's because there's compromise. There's Catholics on, you know, not every Catholic is anti-choice. I'm very clear about that. But there are those who definitely hold that position. So there's always compromise with the other side, you see. And then as this goes on, you know, Biden didn't do anything. He didn't do anything to codify it. And then Kamala Harris, you know, I'll never forget this image. She's on a plane, I think, and she sees the decision come down and been seen at the Supreme Court. And she's turning around and she's, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Well, we were listening to it. We were into it. I mean, at this point, I'm going to quote Jesus. A prophet is never recognized in their own. Okay? We prophesized this. It came true. We were excoriated, you know, my integrity, my reputation. I've been called Hitler and all sorts of things. I've never in my life been attacked for having a friend that happened to be a communist. You know, or had a different political orientation than I did. You know, and the idea that, you know, a major struggle like this would not involve all of us, and you have to put your ego or your polemics or your politics a little bit aside, you know, put that down a little bit. I mean, it never entered my mind. So, I mean, these attacks were really quite extraordinary. I had to actually get an attorney to send a cease and desist letter because they were off the wall. So yes, you know, when you're telling people this is happening, there's a catastrophe going to come down, get up, get out, get on the streets. There's a lot of denial. That's a psychological thing. People would rather it go away. They have, and I'm not minimizing the problems that all of us are dealing with in society now. They're multiple and they're difficult and challenging. But that's when you have to lean in. That's when you have to lean into the struggle when it's the hardest. So that's what it is. That's what happened. And yeah, I don't have a great deal of pleasure in saying, "Oh, I told you so." But I do hope that they notice. I do hope that they're noticing, and I'm available to apologize. And Sarah and I, and all of us in RU who are, you know, painted with that brush, we're available for you.
Yeah, I would just add, first of all, I appreciate that. That's how I'm going to start all my remarks. I appreciate that, Merle. Although sometimes we disagree fiercely, and that's part of the struggle too, which is very different than what this was. And I think it's important to say, look, the big attacks on Rise Up for Abortion Rights came literally the day after Roe was overturned. And we had built a movement and led tens of thousands of people, young women, especially furious young women whose futures and lives were at stake. A lot of women who were older, who remembered the days before Roe, who held friends as they died from back alley abortions, who lived through harrowing experiences, who found the courage to come out and stand with us in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral, in front of the Supreme Court, and tell horrific stories that they had held secret for decades, and make them bare to the world because of what this means. And people need to know the stakes of it. We had all these women from Latin America and with ties to Latin America who were bringing the green wave, the green bandana you see us wearing, into this struggle, which we took up and popularized. We had been doing this and warning, and we were in front of the Supreme Court every day rallying there. And then the decision came down, and we were leading thousands of people in the streets to demand the immediate restoration of abortion rights from the federal level, legal abortion on demand without apology. Leading marches because we had built this up in Los Angeles, in Atlanta, in Chicago, all across New York City, in DC, all across the country. And that same day, the day after Roe was overturned, is when this vicious, unprincipled, quote unquote, woke style movement attack on Rise Up for Abortion Rights came. And they weren't concerned with leading people into the streets and fighting to reverse this. They were fundamentally concerned with turf. And I think we have to be real about how much there is domestication of the so-called movements in this country, and how slavishly they are subordinated to the Democratic Party in this country, and into being quote unquote niches of alternate lifestyle, rather than confronting and facing the scary danger that we face and the sacrifice and struggle that it requires of us. And they didn't want to do that to begin with. And then when we were out there and we were all over the news and everybody was recognizing it and we were getting picked up, then they decided they had to take us down. And it wasn't about us, but it really does damage. It really does damage because they were exposed. They were exposed as having done nothing and still doing nothing. And we made them look bad. It wasn't our intent. Our intent was to get out there and fight for women's fundamental right to abortion and to prevent the horror show that is ever intensifying that we've seen since Roe was overturned. That was our intent. But objectively, us doing that exposed how paltry and conciliatory and capitulationist their program was, and it made them look bad. So they had to try to discredit us. And I think that was what was motivating it. Right. And they spread vicious lies. Accusations of legal fraud, which is outrageous and sets us up to be gone after by the state. They did, as Merle said, demonize those of us, myself in particular, who is a communist in this movement. They used old McCarthyite anti-communist tropes and fear-mongering. They did character assassination against Bob Avakian, who I'm a follower of, who is a principled, large-minded fighter for humanity as a whole, for revolution and communism, but also as a core part of that re-envision the essential dynamic of the fight for women's liberation and the fight today against the assault on abortion rights. And instead of engaging that, Merle and I argue about the substance of that all the time. But instead of arguing against it and saying, no, I disagree with revolution, I disagree with communism, here's what I think is better, they did character assassination. Right. Bob Avakian, they did character assassination on me, and they fear-mongered what is the currency of young people today, unfortunately, which is a lot of woke groupthink and accusations of quote unquote transphobia, because we use the word women. And I think this is, we could talk further maybe in the Q&A about the damage of this wokeism, where people are afraid to be canceled if they don't use the right words, or if they don't conform to the ever permutating standards of wokeness and fashionable word changing, while they stand aside from the fight to change the world. So I think, there was a vicious attack on us from people who are invested in their own nonprofit status within the world as it is, not about changing the world. And it had broader currency because it dovetailed with a lot of anti-communism, a lot of wokeism, a lot of intimidation and cancel culture that exists, and a broad sense of, wow, we lost something and it's going to take a big fight to win it back. And people were afraid of that fight too. And so I think, I go into this because it's important to understand, because it won't be the end of this. Because like Merle said, we're going to fight this as long as it takes. And that's going to take going up against the fascists. It's also going to take, and every serious movement always has, except this is a particularly bad time in the culture. So it's a little bit uglier and more disconcerting in many ways than it ought to be. But it also takes going up against the established, quote unquote, loyal opposition that has made its peace. And it's going to take that now too. And this won't be the end of the attack. So it's important not only to learn from them retrospectively, but to brace ourselves for being willing to wade through the storms of controversy and keep saying, well, what's your solution? What are you doing to solve this? And make those the terms of the fight.
I just have a new slogan. Wait, one second. Change the world, not the words. For what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Some words shouldn't be used. I'm not for anybody using the B word. There's some words that have meaning, but that could be a whole separate conversation.
That's a whole other
I'd love to have with both of you
Where
at some point. But
Yeah.
I want to take the conversation further. And I think that what you've gotten into, both of you, has been really rich. We're approaching the 1 hour mark, and I want to make sure that we speak to some listener questions. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to bring Chantelle and Patricia into it. So this is a question that some people have sent in various wordings, and that's, how can we win this? How can we win? You both said legal abortion, on demand and without apology, nationwide and everywhere. How do we win that? If you're looking at the courts, and in this case in particular, for instance, there isn't much of a pathway for redress. It going to the Fifth Circuit, the same Fifth Circuit that upheld SB 8 isn't something to rely on. The Supreme Court that overturn Roe isn't something to rely on. Absent public outcry, it seems that just relying on the courts would be doomed. And as you talked about, Merle, relying on the Democratic Party to resolve this, again, absent mass struggle, they've been pretty quiet, around what they would do if this goes through. So, how can this fight be won?
Start, and then I know, because this is an area of struggle that we have. I don't believe you can ever use the word win. And this really goes back to Sunsara. I think you said something about this is not human nature. I believe that some things in human nature are definitely hardwired, and the struggle, the dream, what the country is built on an ideal, a dream of equity, equality, human rights, and we judge ourselves so harshly. How close we get to that ideal, and now we're pretty far away. Winning has the assumption in it that the struggle ends, that you have either a utopian ideal, or you come very close to the ideals of what this or any other country or any other attempt at a better society is. I think that these struggles that we're talking about for respect, for compassion, for equality of opportunity, not outcome, opportunity, will go on forever. I mean, I do think there is something called human nature. I can't tell you exactly what, nobody really can. And this is a great debate, scientifically, politically, philosophically. But I feel that freedom is never free, and you have to be constantly vigilant. And I wonder, how will we do these past 49 years of legal abortion? And I started before abortion was legalized by Roe, 71, when it was legal in New York. And not only, everything that Sunsara had spoke about in terms of women and how far we've come in those last 49 years, but everything in terms of women's health and everything we've learned and that we could teach and that we exemplify is really crushed. I mean, personally, yes, all the work is finished. I mean, it has been done. But how will we look at this? Are we going to look back and say, this was a feminist Camelot? Are we going to tell our daughters there was 49 years in time in history when women actually had the right in this country to access safe, legal abortion? I think we should look at this and say, okay, is this the floor? Are we going to accept the way Roe was? Or is this the ceiling? Or how are we going to use these years? And if they have to be memorialized in a way, but they have to also be used as a catalyst for what we're going to do and what we're going to do going forward. So that is how I would answer this. I would say I never think in terms of winning. Whenever there's one battle or another, or one vote or another, and they call me up and they say, well, what do you think of this? Didn't your side win? I said, well, it's one battle in a very, very long time. Okay, and that's the way I do. You only have to look at Black Lives Matter. You only look at the struggle for civil rights. Passing laws does not change hearts and minds. That takes something else. So that's what I would say about the concept of winning.
I would really agree that just passing laws and changing policies, and here's my big caveat that I will add, under this system does not mean we will win. And I think we are seeing that with pretty much everything that was fought for and gained through the massive struggles of the 1960s and 70s, not the least of which women's fundamental right to abortion. This was a huge victory that was won. It wasn't, as I agree with Merle, we didn't win, period. We won very big victories in a larger struggle.
Right.
We also won advances in around Black liberation, around ending official Jim Crow and segregation. There were major changes that were brought about not through the elections, but through massive struggle. People going outside the terms of the ruling class, even the Democrats, and outside the elections, outside the official channels, and saying, no, we demand to be treated as full human beings. We refuse to accept this, and making different demands and creating a compulsion from below that the rulers had to respond to. Now, because we still live in a system that is fundamentally based on exploitation on a global scale and commodity production and relation, where children don't eat or have housing or healthcare unless their parents and their family do, where that's all privatized because we still have divisions of class. We have different oppressive divisions woven into that, white supremacy, male supremacy, that these great advances were never complete, and they were constantly undermined and under attack by the workings of the system itself and by the culture this system fuels and unleashes. And that's why we're living through a vicious backlash, and that's why it's given advantage by the dynamics and nature of the system. So to win and to move beyond the historical epochs in which humans have been divided into masters and slaves, exploiters and exploited, oppressors and oppressed, including the oppression of women by men, we have to get beyond this system of capitalism, imperialism. It has to be brought down through a real revolution, and we need a different system that's not based in exploitation and plunder of the world. We need a genuine socialist economy. We need new legal system that backs it up. We need different ways that people relate, different culture, different education system. There's a concrete vision and blueprint for how the society would be set up after a revolution in the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America that Bob Avakian authored. It sums up and learns from previous revolutionary societies and previous class societies and how we could function this, not with a wave of a wand, do away with this oppression, but day one, legalize abortion and birth control. Day one, have police no longer murdering Black and brown people in the streets. There's some things you can change right away. And then you have a foundation and an economy that doesn't stand in the way of the continuing struggle to uproot these oppressions and move beyond all oppression based on gender and sexual orientation, as well as other forms of oppression, and repair the environment. That's a huge thing to accomplish, and it's the beginning of a process. But through a struggle in a different system, I think we can get to a world where not where we are in a utopia, where there's no conflict ever again, no difference ever again, but no more systematic oppression of one group over another. And I will say that we are in a time that not only makes this revolution more urgent because of the moves towards fascism, because of the destruction of our planet, because of all kinds of crimes that are intensifying under this system, but we are also in a time when it's more possible, because a lot of the norms and basic structures of this society that have long seemed permanent are being ripped up, are being shattered. I mean, the peaceful transfer of power, that's gone. The right of women to abortion, that's gone. There's more underway, and precisely because of how deeply divided this society is, how much that is among the rulers, as well as every institution in society, there's a heightened chance to make this revolution. And I would invite people to watch the Revolution Nothing Less show to learn about this. But also I will underscore again, as I did in my presentation, this won't happen without people standing up and fighting back now against the growing assault. And this is what keeps throwing me, Merle, and many others who don't share the same view of a solution into the working together, shoulder to shoulder, and rise up for abortion rights, because we share a desire and the future she sees as desirable, that I see as desirable, and that others hopefully here gathered see as desirable. And even while they diverge, none of those futures are possible if we lay down and accept this growing juggernaut of female enslavement. So, you know, I think we're in a time to lift our sights to a different world, to learn about that as we roll up our sleeves in this struggle now.
And I would just say we have the urgency of now. We have this struggle. We have to fight this struggle. And the means are an engine process, which is from Gandhi, you know, and it's how we struggle and how we fight that will be the cornerstones and the blocks of what we're building now, whatever we'll call it and however it will be. You just can't accept what is now. And I'm not going to say anything else because I'd like to give a chance to our other panelists to hear some questions from the audience.
Yes, I want to first off thank you both for sharing both your expertise and being in this struggle for decades, and your different perspectives, your insight. It's incredibly important, and it's also important to show that people can struggle struggle. In fact, on very central things, and continue to fight shoulder to shoulder for abortion on demand and without apology. So I want to thank you both, and I want to welcome into the conversation Chantelle, because I know a lot of you are writing in and saying, what do I do? I want to fight back. What do I do? I want to take action. What do I do? Well, here is Chantelle, an incredible organizer with riseupfораbortionrights.org that I'm sure many of you have chatted with either via email or social media or whatnot. Here's Chantelle.
Hello. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and all the questions. I am looking in the chat. I'm Chantelle, national organizer with riseupfораbortionrights.org. And what can we do? This decision could come down any day. This fascist judge out of Texas, why we're gathered on this Zoom today, that this is actually a huge leap in the Christian fascist assault on women's right to abortion. And so this, cannot go down. If it is a negative ruling, we have to mobilize quickly, and we have to be visible. We have to be loud in the streets in cities all across the country. Already some cities have called for day of the decision protests and day after the decision protests. And if you want to host and organize one of those actions in your city, make sure I know. You can DM us on social media. email me at chantelle@riseupforabortionrights.org. Or if you have my number, text me. And that we need to manifest with our slogan, fascist judges, hands off medication abortion. And if it is a negative decision, that this decision is illegitimate, that Mifepristone has been safely used for 20 plus years. There is no reason for this decision. And so I wanted to share with you, there's different ways. I'm going to share my screen. So as you see on our Instagram, we have our latest call to action here: fascist judges, keep your hands off medication abortion. We always post our calls to act on our Instagram. We also have them on our website, and go to our homepage. And this is a way that you can share in your area. Go right down here, take action, fascist judges, hands off medication abortion. There are tools that you can use. You can find and host your protest right here. There's none posted on the map yet, so I'm going to encourage organizers that already have actions to click right here to host and make sure it's put on our map. If we go back to the call to action page and scroll down, there's also ways that you can print our PDF flyer of the statement, get that out leading up to the protest, spreading the word, and you can print PDF posters with our slogans and demands. And you can get crafty and just make your own posters with our slogans and demands and add our website. And that's a really basic way. And to get started organizing, definitely you can reach out to me. I can help post your actions on social media, connect you with other organizers in your city who have reached out. And even there's like mass posting, mass social media campaigns that we can help spread the word about this. And some people might be concerned, like, here, I'll pull up this next page, small actions. Even in Los Angeles, we, sometimes run into having smaller actions. And here's just one example of ways to impact with just a few people, honestly, and people who are committed to telling the truth about what's going on. So they're just chanting Ni una muerta más, and then they're doing a die-in, talking about how when abortion is illegal, women die. So that is a dramatic way for just two people that you can actually do mass impact, because still a lot of people don't know that this case is coming out of Texas, don't know that it's going to affect, yes, even women in California or other blue states. And it's also shocking. And it actually shows, it brings it, this is happening to women in Texas right now. Women are being sent home to bleed out. And so there's a way in which you're bringing that reality right to people. Another aspect of Rise Up for Abortion Rights is our green bandana. I'm going to show you another picture of us. Again, I'm going to Los Angeles a lot, but, working with women from Latin America, talking about different strategies, and know the most important aspect of the Green Wave was not just, helping women get access to abortion in areas where it's not legal. That was important. But the key element was that they were visible, they were out there, they were raising hell, being loud, and, what Merle and Sunsara talked about, uniting people from different perspectives, uniting people in the streets to actually, put forward their demand for legal abortion. Then there is the question in the chat about, there's all this confusion, or people put out that it's about bodily autonomy, that it's about, my body, my choice, and healthcare, which, those things are what's prominent. And so that's one of the importances of our, let me put my video back on. The importances of our slogan, forced motherhood is female enslavement, and getting that slogan and demands up during your actions. And if you want to be an organizer, again, make sure you have make sure I know, and I'll add your email to an organizer's list so that you are getting notifications about new calls to action, about new resources. We recommend on the day of the decision, if it's a negative ruling, to actually pick a place as public as possible, to actually get out amongst the people and try to call forward their fury. And if you're have questions on what kind of actions, again, reach out. I'm very available for, even if you want help me being on a meeting with one of you. If you're trying to make local plans, you want to invite me or someone else, maybe Patricia's available to actually join you on that Zoom call so that you can have some more collectivity and more assurance that what you're doing is right and important.
Thanks, Chantelle. And I want to bring Patricia in to talk about another way that everyone can be involved.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Patricia Wallin, and I'm a member of the Rise Up for Abortion Rights chapter in Chicago. And some of you may not already know this, but Rise Up was formed in January of last year, right after the Supreme Court started to hold hearings that started the process to overturn Roe v. Wade. And that's when Sunsara, Merle, and others said, we have to organize to make our voices heard, and because we just cannot let this happen. And so they decided to start Rise Up for Abortion Rights. And that's when I joined Rise Up last year in March. And that's how I have been able to join in various rallies and marches and other resistance acts since then. And that's why I'm here today to share with you that we do need your support, because we're not funded by any organization, and all of these efforts, they cost money. And even I sometimes forget that it does cost money to get things done, because, we plan and we work on ideas on how to bring information to people and how to organize to let our position on this matter be known and to create resistance. And the reality is that money is needed to help us demand abortion rights for everyone in this country. So I just wanted to share my screen here. So as I was saying, we need money to print flyers, posters, to make stickers. We make bandanas because we need to spread the green. It's a symbol of unity for abortion rights in so many countries in the world. We have to produce sound, and we stage rallies. A lot of money goes into maintaining digital communications like email, text, running the website, and as you can imagine, the list just goes on. So all of that adds up, and it gets expensive for an organization that's running on donations. So just please be a part of this movement by helping to make it possible with your donations. Any amount that you can give and are willing to give helps. If you can give $1, if you can give $5, $20 or more, just please do so. Because, here actually donating is so simple. And if you go to the website, there's a link where you can donate by the Cash App, PayPal, or simply by clicking on the link right there on the website. And please remember that we need everyone's efforts and donations to help us reach more people, because to win this fight, to get back our rights, we need everyone to rise up. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Chantelle, and thanks to everybody who has sent in their questions. I want to bring Merle and Sunsara back in before we close out to speak to a couple questions that relate to the theme of what's at stake with the potential banning of Mifepristone and what we can do. So I think I'm going to first pose to both of you a question from Miriam. Miriam wrote, why does one right-wing judge in Texas get to rule that a drug can be forbidden all over the country?
Well, I would like to speak to that. Before I do, I want to say I love those photos you put up, Patricia and Chantelle, and it reminded me, and I just want to say to everybody watching that Patricia, in one of those photos in front of the Supreme Court, you see her holding a sign, day 6 of a hunger strike. She went on hunger strike. Patricia and Chantelle and Sam were there with me in front of the Supreme Court the day the decision came down, and for weeks leading up to that and after that, down in Kentucky, when that became the first state temporarily to completely eliminate abortion before Roe was overturned, and then it was restored, and now it's under threat again. I just want to say these women have been out like ferociously, and I wanted to give you that recognition as part of this, and thank you for what you presented. On the Texas judge, I want to say a lot of people have said, what right does this one random judge in Texas have to overturn an abortion drug nationally? The thing that's unprecedented and wrong is that a federal judge anywhere would interfere with an FDA approval of a medicine that is a scientific process. It's a medical process. If there was a mistake made medically, and there have been, that's something that gets called into question in a medical way and gets a scientific review by the agencies appropriate, not by a random judge. Judges are there to determine if something violates the Constitution or the rule of law, and not to adjudicate a scientific assessment. So that's what's in violation here, principally, is that it's completely misplaced for this judge to be able to make that evaluation. It is not inappropriate for a federal judge to make policy or to overrule a policy nationally. That's something that a lot of people are confused about. They say, oh, one judge in Texas shouldn't get to decide nationally. When Trump did his Muslim ban, it was one federal judge in Hawaii who declared it unconstitutional. And that is actually the right of a federal judge to do. That's the rule of law, to say if something is unconstitutional, they can block it, and that goes into effect nationwide. The problem is that it's completely misplaced for a judge to be ruling on a medical question like this, number one. And the other thing that is completely outrageous about it that we should understand is that this is the people bringing this lawsuit against the FDA, against Mifepristone, incorporated in Amarillo, Texas, just a few months before bringing this lawsuit. They shopped around the country to find a district, an area where they knew that the judges, or the judge this would be brought before, is a fanatical Christian fascist theocrat. And the judge they're seeing is somebody who has a record of working for anti-abortion legal objectives and ruling against LGBTQ rights, is somebody who has ruled in vicious anti-immigrant rulings. He's somebody who's got a track record, and he is the only judge in Amarillo, only federal judge in Amarillo. So they knew that if they incorporate there and bring a case there, it will be before him. Second, it sits in the Fifth Circuit. Sam was talking about this before. So if it gets appealed, it goes up to the next highest level of federal courts, the Fifth Circuit appeals. And that is the most fascist-packed federal appellate court in the country. It has been for 15 years, or that's not an exact number, but for at least that long. And if it's appealed from that level, it goes to the Supreme Court, which we know is also a fascist-packed Supreme Court. So this is actually sort of the full ripening of there being a federal judiciary that is packed with theocratic judges from the bottom to the top, the entire chute all the way up, the appeals to the highest court. And they shopped around the country to find a judge like this, which is why a case that has no legitimate standing and no legitimate basis by any objective evaluation of what the rule of law should be was able to be shopped around and incorporated and brought before a judge here. And it has a very high possibility of being upheld, not only by him, but all the way up. And the other thing that is worth noting, just legally so people understand it, is that there was an extra hearing last Wednesday by this judge who did something further unprecedented by trying to keep the hearing secret explicitly so that there wouldn't be protesters outside, because Amarillo is very hard to get to. It's 9 hours outside of Houston, Austin, all of this. It's remote. So he wanted to keep it secret so people couldn't protest. He kept it almost closed off to the public entirely. It was hard to find out what was going on inside of it. And that hearing was actually a appeal or a push from the plaintiffs in this case, the Christian fascists who brought this case, because they are so confident in their case that they are trying to preemptively prevent an injunction from the ban on Mifepristone going into effect if the judge rules to do so. So in other words, a lot of times if a lower level federal judge says, oh, I'm going to make this ruling, and the opposing side is going to challenge it, a lot of times there'll be an injunction where it doesn't get enforced immediately while it's working its way up the appeals. But the anti-abortion plaintiffs in this case were so confident, that they'll have a favorable ruling, that they had a further hearing to say preemptively, if we get a favorable ruling and you pull Mifepristone, we want to preemptively prevent an injunction on this enforcement while it's being appealed. So it's like a double whammy, and it's just so people understand the character and the expectations, at least on the anti-abortion side of what they're pushing for.
Very helpful, Sunsara. Merle, was there anything you wanted to add?
Very little. I think Sunsara, you gave a very, very good explanation. I just do want to add that they have packed, the Republicans and the right have packed the federal judiciary. And this is also a result of that. And there is something that can be done. Biden can override this. And if this comes out, you can say, well, I'm just saying that we will have these pills being distributed anyway. I mean, but the administration is so uncourageous on that. I mean, it's the same thing with the overturn of Roe. He didn't say we're going to put clinics in, on federal lands. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. No, they didn't do that. Obama didn't pack the federal judiciary. Biden didn't. Of course, there was opposition, but this is what happens. And when I say that the right is so tactical and so consistent and persistent, this is where we are. And it is within a rock and a hard place. And unfortunately, we don't have leadership at the executive level that has the courage or the political will or the vision to take steps to do something unprecedented, as you would say, and override this. That's the problem.
So
I did want to just add one further thing, which is to underscore what Chantelle was emphasizing. Look, when a decision comes, if there's a negative decision, if there's a positive ruling, if this judge says no, that would be very, very good in the short term. It will not end this fight, but it would be very positive. But if there's a negative ruling, and we don't know how this will happen, but if there's a negative ruling, it is very likely that this will be a shock. It'll be amplified in the headlines. It started to get amplified in the headlines, but still most people don't even know about this case. This will seem to come out of the blue for millions of people in this country, and it will affect access to abortion everywhere. In California, in Chicago, in New York City, everywhere, in the deepest of the blue. And there will be a moment there when people are going to be looking for understanding and looking for direction. And this is where I saw somebody in the questions, Pam Laskin, who's been part of this struggle in New York City, a professor there, really glad to see you tuned in. She asked, when are we going to have bigger mobilizations again? And we need to be working towards that. But I will say there's a particular import to lightning emergency response mobilizations day of, day after, when this news is breaking, where we put out a press release and say in all these cities, people are going to be gathering and raising the demand, legal abortion on demand without apology, forced motherhood is female enslavement, rise up for abortion rights, join the fight. this message being injected there matters disproportionately, and is part of how we get to the place where we can bring forward thousands, tens of thousands, millions to wage the struggle in the streets the way that's necessary. And if we don't, then the dominant voices will be precisely, well, you see, now this is gone, and so women are going to have to rely on surgical abortion or this other kind of just Mifepristone by itself. Here's how we're going to manage losing more access. And if that's the entire discussion that people get exposed to, that just continues this deadly dynamic that we've been trapped in, where yesterday's outrage is today's compromised position and tomorrow's limit of what can be imagined. And we're constantly on shrinking ground. And the dominant voices from the Democratic Party, precisely like Merle just said, they're not fighting this. And from the so-called movement is to, how are we going to try to work within this shrinking space we have? And Rise Up for Abortion Rights stands out. This is the only consistent national voice that unites people from different perspectives to say, no, we have to expand that access.
Right.
We have to wage a political struggle and resistance. And so even small rallies on the day after that raise this green bandana, that inject this message out on social media and in the news, when millions are agonizing and paying attention and not, who saw this coming? We did, and we have a way to fight it. We've got to, I just want to underscore, so all the resources that Chantelle was raising and all the idea of putting on the calendar now, day after we're rallying here in New York, day after we're rallying here in Austin. That's the import of, we're not just kind of, oh, keep the flame alive. This would have a disproportionate impact in this moment.
Excellent.
And I would just add, and also because we don't know when this ruling will happen, in the meantime, spreading the statement that Rise Up has done, in addition to spreading most essentially these slogans and these demands, really does matter. There was a question, I want to close out because I know we're over the time, but there was a question that Merle spoke to some just now regarding the way forward. You know, what could be done? You know, can Biden's FDA ignore the order? Would that be an important victory to get him to do that? And I wanted to say, first of all, because there is confusion on this, the judge in Texas, who his decision binds, is the FDA and the DOJ. It is not binding to the providers, nor is it binding to the patients. And that's different than what happened in the Supreme Court. And so where there is potential is in people in a potential refusal to go along with that order. There is not right now a lot of likelihood that would happen. There are providers who have already said that they will continue to provide Mifepristone until the FDA tells them that they can no longer do that. And that is a different situation than the US sole distributor of Mifepristone saying in advance that they will comply and not provide pills to over 31 states. So I think that there is potential here in ways that people can impact it, but it will not happen, in my opinion, without a real struggle to do so. But if others want to add on to that, I think it would be helpful.
Sam, I think that's very, very important because you're talking about mobilization of physicians. And when I talk about the providers who are naturally very conservative and have a right to have a fear about this because, you know, some of these states have put in fines of hundreds of thousands of dollars. They can lose their license if they do, you know, give out this pill, or if they treat, you know, a woman for an ectopic pregnancy. I mean, this is what they're facing. And I would love to see the rising of providers saying, you know, we have given through the Hippocratic Oath and still working with women over all these years, our compassion, our love, and our commitment, and we've, you know, faced murders and flown all over the country to provide services, and we will not comply. That's what, you know, a girl can dream. That's one of my little, but that takes, you know, working with physicians because it's their livelihood. They face their heroes, but yet, when you're faced with your license being pulled, that little girl from Texas who was raped and had to go to Illinois or another state, I mean, that doctor is still fighting, a criminal investigation. So yes, that they have to be mobilized. They should be mobilized. There should be strong statements against being made into arms of this state.
I would just, in closing out, I would echo something that Merle said at the beginning of looking to the women of Iran and looking at the lessons and the experience there. And the women there are now, and the men, and actually that society as a whole is going through tremendous repression, tremendous, I mean, many thousands imprisoned. There's torture going on. There've been mass executions. There's mysterious poisonings, maybe not that mysterious, of girls' schools with no investigation or serious investigation or punishment from the state. So where that struggle goes is sharply contended, and I feel a tremendous importance of people continuing to support the women rising up there and that struggle. But I think there's also lessons in how rapidly that society tore open and how powerful potentially the unleashed fury of women is as a mighty force in revolution and as a mighty force in waking up people to stand up for justice, and not to underestimate, just because people are calm right now, there's a lot of horror that women are swallowing. There's a lot of nightmare that's being forced onto them right now. And so, it's the potential ruling in Mifepristone, but it's also the increasing restrictions across the country. It's the lives being shattered every day by forced motherhood, which is going on now. It's the women whose lives are on the line for pregnancies they wanted, but they go badly, and the doctors are afraid to give them the treatment they need. It's the fact that in states like Tennessee, they're bringing up the death penalty. They're moving to make abortions punishable by the death penalty. I mean, these are things that are not stopping, and so they not only need to be fought, they also this is a tinderbox. There's a tinderbox or a seething anger that's building, and you don't know when and how it's going to erupt. And we have to be fighting to shape people's understanding now of how illegitimate this is, how little we should put up with it, how that's even of smaller voices now, smaller numbers now, setting terms. This is why I feel very strongly that what Rise Up for Abortion Rights did, even though we didn't stop the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it matters that we planted a fighting opposition and drew clear lines of demarcation. Forced motherhood is female enslavement. We refuse to accept this. We have to be raising this now. We have to be calling this forward now. And when that rips open, if you have that kind of upsurge from below, if you have that kind of outpouring, you won't, among many things, you won't get the kind of courage Merle is dreaming about from the providers and from doctors if you don't have it from all of society. But when you had it, and that's why I'm saying, look at Iran, when you had that rip open, people did things they never in their lives thought they would do. There were women dancing in the streets with their hair uncovered, throwing it into bonfires, joined by thousands of men, shaking that society to its foundation. And people are still on International Women's Day. Women came out in public with their heads uncovered in the face of death and all the repression, and the courage that we can find, not by waiting for it, but by acting on it now and calling it forward from others, is very essential. And that's something that I think Rise Up for Abortion Rights has contributed to this society already and needs to continue to do together from our different perspectives. Even as, I will say again, I think we have to be lifting our sights to and moving to get beyond a society where this could ever go down. So that's what I want to say to close out. In addition to thanking everybody who stuck around, and Merle, Sam, Patricia, Chantelle for being part of this program.
And to continue your connection to Iran, and I visited Iran actually. So I have a deep connection. Very close people. Women, life, freedom. That's their slogan. So I would say that's what we're fighting for. And it's that similarity. Freedom, women and freedom, and that connection. And there's a connection all over the world. And we should, I always said in my second St. Patrick's speech, we have to be points of light, warriors of light. And that's what we're talking about, bringing the light of understanding, commitment, and struggle. Thank you, everybody. And I would say, please also donate, because we have to have a better Zoom platform so we can hear everybody and see them better. And thank you all. Thank you all.
I just want to close and thank all the panelists for joining us, and thank all of you for sticking around, and most importantly, posing really thoughtful questions. And those that we did not speak to on today's webinar, we'll definitely be speaking to in other ways. So be sure to follow us on social media. Make sure that you're subscribed to our e-newsletter. And I'm just going to end. Hopefully folks will join in with me in saying this together. Fascist judges, keep your hands off abortion medication. Legal abortion on demand and without apology. Nationwide and everywhere. Forced motherhood is female enslavement. Rise up for abortion rights.
Rise up for abortion rights.
Rise up.